She sat alone on New Year's Eve, until a billionaire single father walked in. Here's what Laura Pierce knew on New Year's Eve. She was 34, her bookstore was empty, her father was dead, and she'd be spending midnight alone for the third year running. Here's what she didn't know. In about 5 minutes, a billionaire and his heartbroken daughter would walk through her door and give her every single thing she'd stopped believing in. Close your eyes for just a moment. Think about the last time a story made you feel something real. Made your heart race. Made tears fall without permission. Made you remember why being human is so beautifully complicated. That's what we do here at CJ Stories. Whether you're returning or just discovering us, welcome home. This is your safe space for tears, laughter, hope, and everything in between. Today's story will take you somewhere unexpected. It'll make you think. It'll make you feel. And I promise you, you won't see the ending coming. But here's the thing, the magic only works if you stay till the very end. No skipping. No rusing. Just you, me, and a story that might just change how you see the world. If it moves you, let me know you're here, subscribe, like, and share this with someone whose heart needs touching today. Ready? Let's step into today's story. The clock above the fireplace showed 9:47 p.m. on December 31st, 2024, and Laura Pierce sat alone in her bookstore cafe, watching champagne bubbles rise in a glass she had no intention of finishing. 34 years old. New Year's Eve. Completely alone. She'd told her sister Rachel she preferred it this way. Told herself the same lie 3 times today. The truth sat heavier. This was her 3rd New Year's Eve since Dad died, and the empty chair across from her still felt like a wound that wouldn't close. Outside her shop window, downtown Asheville glowed with string lights and the laughter of couples heading to parties she'd declined. Laura ran her finger along the spine of the book beside her, Dad's favorite Langston Hughes collection. She'd placed it there this morning like he might walk through the door any minute and ask to borrow it again. The brass bell above her door chimed. Laura looked up, ready to point at the closed sign, but the words died in her throat. The man in the doorway wasn't from Asheville. She knew this immediately, the way you know when something doesn't quite fit the landscape you see every day. Tall, dark hair slightly disheveled by the winter wind, wearing a charcoal coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But it was his eyes that stopped her, dark, exhausted, carrying the kind of weight that made her own loneliness feel less solitary. And he was holding the hand of a little girl in a purple winter coat who looked about 6 years old, with tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I saw your lights on. My daughter, she's upset, and he paused, glancing down at the child. Is there any chance you have hot chocolate?" Laura stood without thinking. "Of course. Come." The little girl's crying had softened to hiccups. Her father guided her to the armchair nearest the fireplace, kneeling beside her with the practiced patience of someone who'd weathered many storms. Laura disappeared into her cafe kitchen, muscle memory taking over as she warmed milk and melted dark chocolate, adding a touch of vanilla the way Dad had taught her. When she returned with 2 mugs, she'd made one for the father too. The man was speaking softly to his daughter. "Sophie, sweetheart, I know you miss her. Especially tonight. But Mama would want you to enjoy the new year, remember? She'd want you to see the fireworks." The little girl, Sophie, shook her head against his shoulder. "Everyone at the party kept asking where our mama was. I didn't know what to say." Laura's chest tightened. She set the mugs down on the side table, trying to be invisible, but Sophie's red-rimmed eyes found hers. "Is that for me?" Sophie's voice was small. "It is," Laura said gently. "With extra marshmallows. I'm Laura. I'm Sophie. That's my daddy." She pointed at him, then picked up the mug with both hands. The man stood, extending his hand. "Alexander Caldwell. I really appreciate this. We were at a New Year's party at the Grove Park Inn, but," he glanced at Sophie. "It wasn't the right fit." Laura shook his hand. His grip was warm, solid. She noticed he wasn't wearing a wedding ring, and the pale line where one used to be told its own story. "You don't have to explain," Laura said. "Holidays are hard." Something shifted in Alexander's expression. Recognition, maybe. The kind that passes between people who've both spent time in grief's waiting room. "You're open on New Year's Eve?" he asked, glancing around the bookstore. Shelves lined every wall, packed with hardcovers and paperbacks, and the cafe corner where they stood smelled like coffee beans and old pages. "Not exactly," Laura admitted. "I just didn't want to be home." Alexander nodded slowly. Understanding without pity. She appreciated that. Sophie had stopped crying entirely now, absorbed in her hot chocolate. She looked around the bookstore with growing curiosity. "Do you have any books about stars?" Laura smiled. "I have a whole section. Want to see?" Sophie looked at her father, who nodded. The little girl slipped off the chair and took Laura's hand without hesitation, the kind of trust children give before the world teaches them to be cautious. As Laura guided Sophie toward the astronomy section, she felt Alexander following a few steps behind. She pulled out a beautiful illustrated book about constellations and sat on the floor with Sophie, opening it between them. "My dad and I used to look at stars," Laura said quietly. "He told me that people we love become stars when they're gone, so they can still watch over us." Sophie's eyes widened. "Really? That's what he believed?" "My mama died," Sophie whispered. "4 years ago. I was only 2, so I don't remember her much. But Daddy says she loved me." Laura's throat tightened. She glanced up at Alexander, who had gone very still, watching his daughter with an expression that made Laura's heart ache. "I'm sure she did," Laura said. "And I bet she's the brightest star up there." Sophie considered this seriously, then looked at the book again. "Can you read this to me?" "Sophie," Alexander said gently. "We've already taken up enough of Laura's time." "I don't mind," Laura said, and meant it. She hadn't expected company tonight, but now that they were here, the emptiness that had sat beside her all evening felt lighter. Alexander hesitated, then lowered himself to sit on the floor across from them, his back against a bookshelf. He picked up his hot chocolate, cradling it between his hands. Laura began reading about Orion, about Cassiopeia, about the stories ancient people told themselves when they looked up at the night. Sophie leaned against her shoulder, and Laura felt something unlock in her chest, something that had been closed since Dad's funeral. When she finished the chapter, Sophie yawned. "What do you say, sweetheart?" Alexander prompted. "Thank you, Miss Laura. Just Laura is fine." She closed the book. "You can borrow it if you want. Bring it back whenever." Sophie's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Alexander stood, helping Sophie to her feet. "That's very kind. We're actually staying in Asheville for a few months. I'm working remotely, trying to give Sophie a change of scenery." He paused. "We moved into a house near the Biltmore estate last week." "Welcome to Asheville, then," Laura said, standing and brushing off her jeans. "It's a good place to heal." Their eyes met, and Laura felt that recognition again. Two people who understood loss, standing in a bookstore on New Year's Eve while the rest of the world counted down to new beginnings. "Can we come back?" Sophie asked, clutching the star book to her chest. "I like it here." "Anytime," Laura said. "I'm open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 6. Alexander pulled out his wallet, but Laura waved him off. "The hot chocolate's on the house. New Year's gift." "I can't let you." "You can, and you will." Laura smiled. "Besides, Sophie's bringing the book back, so I know you're good for it." Alexander smiled then, a real one that reached his eyes and made him look younger than the exhaustion suggested. He was handsome, Laura noticed, not in the polished way of the men who usually vacationed in Asheville, but in a lived-in way that suggested he'd earned every line around his eyes. "Thank you, Laura," he said quietly. "This was exactly what we needed tonight." "Me too," she admitted before she could stop herself. They stood there for a moment, the clock ticking closer to midnight, neither quite ready to break whatever fragile thing had formed in the last hour. Sophie tugged on Alexander's hand. "Daddy, can we see the fireworks from here?" Laura walked to the front window. "The best view is actually from the roof. I go up there sometimes." She hesitated. "You're welcome to join me. If you want." Alexander looked at her for a long moment. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Laura locked the front door and led them through the back of the shop, up a narrow staircase that opened onto the flat roof. The night air was cold and sharp, and downtown Asheville spread below them in a carpet of lights. In the distance, the Blue Ridge Mountains rose like dark waves against the star-filled sky. Sophie gasped. "It's so pretty." Laura had brought up a blanket she kept in her office, and she spread it on the roof. They sat together, Sophie between Laura and Alexander, all three of them looking up at the stars that were just beginning to appear as the city lights dimmed. "Which one is Mama?" Sophie asked, her voice small. Alexander pointed to the brightest star visible. "That one, sweetheart. See how it shines." Sophie nodded, satisfied. Laura checked her phone. 2 minutes to midnight. "I've never spent New Year's Eve on a roof before," Alexander said, glancing at her. "First time for everything." "What made you open a bookstore?" he asked. "My dad," Laura said simply. "He was a professor at UNC Asheville. American literature. He loved books more than anything, except maybe me and my sister. When he died 2 years ago, I used what he left me to open this place. It felt like keeping him close." "I'm sorry," Alexander said, and the way he said it told her he truly understood. "What do you do?" Laura asked. "You said you work remotely." "I own a tech company. Software development, mostly for healthcare systems. It's based in Silicon Valley, but I can run it from anywhere." He paused. After my wife died, I threw myself into work. Built the company into something bigger than I'd ever imagined. But Sophie deserves more than a father who's married to his laptop. So you came to Asheville. Fresh start. New year, new place. The mountain seemed like the opposite of the tech bubble. He smiled slightly. Though I'm realizing I don't actually know how to slow down. The countdown started somewhere in the distance. People shouting numbers. 10, 9, 8. Sophie stood up, excited now. We get to make wishes. 7, 6, 5. Laura stood too, Alexander beside her. 4, 3, 2. Happy New Year. Sophie squealed as fireworks exploded over downtown Asheville, gold and silver and blue cascading across the sky. Laura watched them reflect in Sophie's delighted eyes, felt the warmth of Alexander standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and thought maybe Dad was right about stars after all. When the fireworks ended, Sophie was yawning again. Alexander scooped her up, the star book tucked under his arm. Thank you, he said to Laura as they descended back into the bookstore. For everything. This was the best New Year's Eve we've had in 4 years. Mine too, Laura said, and realized it was true. At the door, Alexander hesitated. Would it be okay if we came back? Not just for the book. Laura's heart did something complicated. I'd like that. Tuesday, then? Tuesday. He smiled, and Laura opened the door for them, watching as Alexander carried his sleeping daughter to a sleek black car parked down the street. He turned once, waved, and then they were gone. Laura locked up and climbed back to the roof, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. The stars were impossibly bright now, and she found herself looking for the one Alexander had pointed out to Sophie. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Happy New Year. You survived another one solo. Proud of you. Laura smiled and typed back, actually, I had company tonight. I'll tell you tomorrow. She stayed on the roof until the cold drove her inside, but for the first time in 2 years, the loneliness felt like something that might not be permanent. And she couldn't stop thinking about Alexander Caldwell's dark eyes, the way he'd looked at her like he recognized something familiar, and the quiet hope that Tuesday might come faster than usual. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. Tuesday morning arrived with pale winter sunlight filtering through the bookstore windows, and Laura found herself checking the door every 5 minutes like a teenager waiting for prom. She'd rearranged the children's section twice. Brewed fresh coffee 3 times. Changed her sweater once, then felt ridiculous and changed back. Rachel had called that morning, demanding details about the mysterious New Year's Eve visitors, and Laura had tried to play it casual. Failed completely. So let me get this straight, Rachel had said, barely containing her laughter. A billionaire single dad and his adorable daughter walked into your bookstore on New Year's Eve, you gave them hot chocolate and watched fireworks together, and now you're pretending you're not completely smitten. I'm not smitten. I'm just being friendly to new residents of Asheville. Right. And I'm the Queen of England. Laura had hung up on her sister's cackling. Now it was 10:32 a.m., and the bell above the door chimed. Laura's heart jumped, but it was just Mrs. Henderson looking for the latest Louise Penny mystery. By noon, Laura had convinced herself Alexander wasn't coming. He was probably busy with actual billionaire things. Conference calls. Acquiring companies. Whatever people with that much money did on Tuesday mornings. She was restocking the poetry section when the bell chimed again at 12:15. Sophie burst through the door first, still wearing purple but this time a sweater with a unicorn on it, her face bright with excitement. Laura. We came back. Alexander followed, carrying 2 takeout bags from the French bistro down the street, looking slightly uncertain. I hope we're not interrupting. Sophie insisted we couldn't come empty-handed. Laura's smile felt too wide, but she couldn't help it. You brought lunch? Peace offering for monopolizing your New Year's Eve. He lifted the bags. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got the quiche and the Niçoise salad. Sophie voted for both. Smart kid. Laura gestured to the cafe tables by the window. Those are perfect. They settled at the corner table with the best view of the street. Sophie immediately pulled out the star book, opening it to a page she'd marked with a purple ribbon. I read 3 whole chapters by myself, Sophie announced proudly. Well, Daddy helped with some words. But mostly me. That's impressive, Laura said, genuinely meaning it. She began unpacking the food, the simple domesticity of it feeling strangely natural. When their fingers brushed reaching for the same container, she felt that spark again. Alexander noticed. She could tell by the slight pause before he pulled back, the way his eyes met hers for just a second longer than necessary. How's the settling in going? Laura asked, trying to sound normal. Chaotic. Alexander smiled. The house is beautiful but enormous. I keep finding rooms I forgot existed. Yesterday Sophie discovered a library on the 3rd floor and declared she's moving her bedroom there. Can I? Sophie asked hopefully. We'll discuss it, Alexander said, the practiced response of a parent who'd learned to negotiate everything. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easier than Laura expected. Alexander asked about the bookstore, seeming genuinely interested in how she'd built it from nothing. She found herself telling him about Dad's collection, how half the poetry section had been his personal library. He sounds like he was remarkable, Alexander said quietly. He was. He believed books were how we learned to be human. Laura paused. What about Sophie's mom? If you don't mind me asking. Alexander glanced at Sophie, who was absorbed in her book, then spoke softly. Caroline. We met in college, married young. She had a heart condition nobody knew about until after Sophie was born. An aneurysm, 4 years ago. One minute she was laughing at breakfast, the next. He stopped, swallowed. Sophie was only 2. Sometimes I think that's a blessing, that she doesn't remember the loss. Other times I wish she had more memories. Laura reached across the table without thinking, covering his hand with hers. I'm sorry. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers briefly before pulling back. Your dad, was it sudden? Cancer. We had 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Long enough to say everything, not long enough for any of it to matter. Laura looked out the window. He made me promise I'd keep living, not just existing. Some days I'm better at it than others. I think he'd be proud of this place, Alexander said, looking around the bookstore. It's special. You can feel it the moment you walk in. That's the nicest thing anyone said about it. Sophie looked up from her book. Daddy, can Laura show us the mountains? You said you wanted to explore Asheville. Alexander looked slightly embarrassed. Sophie, Laura's working. But Laura found herself saying, actually, Tuesdays are pretty quiet. And there's a spot I could show you. Best view in Asheville, barely anyone knows about it. You're sure? Alexander asked. I'm sure. 20 minutes later, Laura had flipped the sign to back at 3 p.m. and they were in Alexander's car, heading up the winding roads toward the Blue Ridge Parkway. Sophie chattered from the back seat about stars and unicorns and whether mountains were bigger than clouds. Laura directed them to a pull-off she'd discovered with Dad during one of their weekend hikes. They parked and walked a short trail through winterbear trees until the forest opened onto an overlook that made Sophie gasp. The mountains rolled away in every direction, blue-green and ancient, touched with afternoon gold. Downtown Asheville was a small cluster of buildings far below, and the sky stretched impossibly wide. It's like we're flying, Sophie whispered. Laura sat on the flat rock at the edge, legs dangling over, and Sophie immediately climbed up beside her. Alexander hesitated, then sat on Laura's other side, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. My dad proposed to my mom somewhere near here, Laura said. He never could remember the exact spot, which drove Mom crazy. But he said when you find the right person, every mountain starts to look like the one. That's beautiful, Alexander said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching clouds cast shadows across the valleys. Sophie started collecting pine cones, arranging them in careful patterns on the rock. Can I ask you something? Alexander said quietly, his voice meant only for Laura. Sure. Why were you alone on New Year's Eve? Someone like you, I'd think you'd have a dozen invitations. Laura smiled. Someone like me? Kind. Beautiful. Running a successful business in a city full of people who clearly love this place. He paused. I watched you with Sophie. You're a natural with kids. I was engaged once, Laura said, surprising herself with the admission. 3 years ago. He wanted me to move to Charlotte, sell Dad's collection, get a real job in finance. When Dad got sick, he gave me an ultimatum, the wedding or playing nurse. He chose Dad. No regrets, but it left me a little cautious about letting people in. He was an idiot, Alexander said simply. Laura laughed. Thanks. I mean it. What you built, what you're doing, honoring your father while creating something new, that takes courage. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you. Their eyes met, and Laura felt her breath catch. The intensity in his gaze made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Sophie ran back with a handful of pine cones. Laura, can you teach me the constellations? Like, all of them? That's a lot of stars, Laura said, grateful for the interruption, for the chance to look away from Alexander's eyes before she did something impulsive. I'm a good learner, Sophie insisted. Tell you what. Next clear night, if your dad says it's okay, you can come to the bookstore after closing and we'll go up on the roof. I have a telescope up there. Sophie's eyes went huge. Really? Daddy, can we? Please? Alexander smiled. If Laura's offering, how can I say no? They stayed on the mountain until the sun started dropping toward the horizon, painting everything gold and rose. On the drive back, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, and the car filled with that particular quiet that comes when a child finally stops moving. "Thank you for today," Alexander said softly. "I can't remember the last time I just existed somewhere beautiful without thinking about quarterly reports." "You're welcome. Thank you for lunch. And for making Tuesday the best day of my week." He glanced at her, smiled. "It's only Tuesday." "Exactly." Back at the bookstore, Alexander carried sleepy Sophie inside while Laura unlocked the door. She poured coffee for both of them, decaf for her, regular for him, and they sat in the cafe corner while Sophie napped on the couch Laura kept in her office. "Can I ask you something now?" Laura said. "Fair's fair." "Why Asheville? Of all the places you could have gone, why here?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee mug in his hands. "After Caroline died, I built walls. Threw myself into the company, hired the best nannies money could buy for Sophie, convinced myself that providing financially was the same as being present. Then 6 months ago, Sophie's therapist told me she was becoming anxious, withdrawn. Said she needed stability, needed her father, not his money." He looked up at Laura. "I realized I'd spent 4 years running from grief instead of learning to live with it. Sophie deserved better. I deserved better. So I looked at a map, found the place that seemed furthest from Silicon Valley in every way that mattered, and here we are." "That's brave," Laura said. "It's terrifying," Alexander admitted. "I don't know how to be still. Don't know how to be just a dad without the work as a buffer. But watching Sophie laugh today, seeing her excited about stars instead of worried about whether I'm checking my phone, that felt right." "You're doing better than you think." "I hope so." He met her eyes. "And meeting you, that feels like maybe this move was the right choice." Laura's heart did that complicated thing again. "Alexander." "I know," he said quickly. "I know this is fast. I know we just met. But I haven't felt this comfortable with another person in years, and I don't want to pretend I haven't noticed." "I've noticed too," Laura said quietly. They sat there, the admission hanging between them, full of possibility and fear and the understanding that neither of them was particularly good at casual anything. Sophie emerged from the office, rubbing her eyes. "Is it star time yet?" Alexander checked his watch. "Not quite, sweetheart. Maybe in a few days when the sky's clearer?" "How about Friday?" Laura offered. "Weather's supposed to be perfect. You could come for dinner first, if you want. I make a mean spaghetti." "Can we, Daddy? Please?" Alexander looked at Laura, something soft in his expression. "We'd love that." When they left, Sophie hugged Laura goodbye like they'd been friends for years. Alexander lingered at the door. "Friday," he said. "Friday," Laura confirmed. He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her cheek, brief and gentle and full of promise. "Thank you for today. For all of it." Then they were gone, and Laura stood in her empty bookstore, touching her cheek where she could still feel the warmth of his lips. Her phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. "Sophie says to tell you that you're her new favorite person." "She's not wrong." Laura smiled and typed back, "She's pretty great herself." "You both are." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I keep thinking about that overlook. About sitting there with you. Is it ridiculous that I'm already looking forward to Friday?" "Not ridiculous at all. I've been looking forward to Friday since Tuesday." "It is Tuesday." "Exactly. See you Friday, Alexander." "See you Friday, Laura." Laura closed the bookstore that night with a lightness she hadn't felt in 2 years. She climbed to the roof one more time, looking at the stars, and whispered, "I think you'd like him, Dad. I think you'd like him a lot." The brightest star seemed to shine a little brighter, and Laura chose to believe that meant approval. Friday couldn't come fast enough. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. Friday arrived with the kind of crisp January clarity that made Asheville look like a postcard. Laura had spent the morning preparing, making her grandmother's spaghetti sauce from scratch, setting up the telescope on the roof, trying not to overthink what this dinner meant. Rachel had stopped by at noon, ostensibly to borrow a book, actually to interrogate. "So you're cooking dinner for him," Rachel said, grinning. "With his daughter present. That's very domestic of you. It's just spaghetti and stargazing. Don't make it into something. Laura, you haven't cooked for anyone since Dad died. You're making it into something all by yourself." Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe Laura was terrified. Maybe that's why her hands shook slightly as she stirred the sauce at 5:30, checking the time every few minutes. They arrived at 6, Sophie running ahead with a drawing she'd made, the three of them on the mountain, surrounded by stars. Laura taped it to her refrigerator immediately, and Sophie beamed. Alexander handed her a bottle of wine, looking slightly nervous himself. I wasn't sure what goes with spaghetti, so I asked the sommelier at the Grove Park Inn. He seemed very serious about it. I'm sure it's perfect, Laura said, letting them in. Dinner was easy in the way good things often are. Sophie talked about the homeschool lessons Alexander had started with her, about the fox she'd seen in their backyard, about how she'd read 2 more chapters of the Star book. Alexander watched his daughter with such open affection that Laura felt something in her chest expand. When Alexander helped clear the dishes, their hands brushed and lingered. He smiled at her, that quiet smile she was beginning to recognize as his real one, the one that said he was letting his guard down. This was wonderful, he said softly. I can't remember the last time someone cooked for us. My pleasure. Dad always said good food and good company were the foundation of everything else. They did dishes together while Sophie colored at the table, and the domesticity of it felt both thrilling and frightening. Laura kept catching herself imagining more nights like this, then pulling back from the thought. By 7:30, full dark had settled and the stars were emerging. They climbed to the roof, Laura carrying blankets, Alexander carrying Sophie, who was buzzing with excitement. The telescope was already set up, and Laura had brought cushions and thermoses of hot chocolate. Downtown Asheville glowed below them, but up here, the stars were taking over the sky. Okay, Laura said, adjusting the telescope. Who wants to see Saturn first? Sophie's hand shot up. Laura showed her how to look through the eyepiece, and when Sophie saw the rings, her gasp was pure magic. Daddy, look! It has a halo. Alexander took his turn, and Laura watched his face transform with wonder. When he stepped back, he was grinning like a kid. That's incredible. I've never actually looked through a telescope before. Really? Tech billionaire, never seen Saturn. I've been busy building empires. Apparently I've been missing out. They spent an hour exploring the sky. Laura showed them the Orion Nebula, the Pleiades, Jupiter's moons. She taught Sophie how to find Polaris, explained why stars twinkle, told stories about the constellations that made Sophie laugh. Alexander sat close to Laura on the blanket, their shoulders touching, and somewhere around 8:30 his hand found hers. Neither of them said anything about it, just sat there holding hands while Sophie traced constellations with her finger against the sky. That one's Mama, Sophie said, pointing to the bright star Alexander had shown her on New Year's Eve. And that one's Laura's daddy. They're neighbors now. Laura's throat tightened. Alexander squeezed her hand gently. Around 9, Sophie started yawning. Alexander picked her up, and she immediately curled against his shoulder, half asleep. I should get her home, he said reluctantly. They packed up the telescope together, moving in easy synchronization, and headed back downstairs. At the bookstore door, Alexander shifted Sophie to one arm and reached for Laura with the other. Thank you, he said. For tonight. For making us feel welcome here. For everything. You're welcome anytime. Both of you. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back. She didn't. The kiss was soft, careful, his lips warm against hers. It lasted maybe 3 seconds but felt like something that changed the architecture of her world. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. Is this okay? Us? Yes, Laura whispered. This is very okay. Sophie stirred against his shoulder. Daddy, are you kissing Laura? Alexander laughed softly. Maybe a little. Good. I like Laura. She should stay. Go to sleep, sweetheart. After they left, Laura touched her lips, smiling like an idiot. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Alexander, Sophie's already asleep. She said tonight was the best night ever. I agree with her. Laura, same here. When can I see you again? Alexander, tomorrow? Is that too soon? Laura, not soon enough. Lunch? Alexander, it's a date. The next 3 weeks blurred together in the best possible way. Alexander and Sophie became fixtures at the bookstore. They came for lunch, for coffee, for story time. Sophie started leaving her drawings on Laura's desk. Alexander started leaving his walls down. They went hiking in the Blue Ridge Mountains, had picnics despite the cold, explored Asheville's art galleries with Sophie choosing her favorite paintings. Alexander took them to the Biltmore estate, and Sophie declared the library was almost as good as Laura's bookstore. Almost. Laura met them for breakfast before Sophie's lessons. Alexander stayed late at the bookstore, helping shelve books after Sophie fell asleep on the couch. They talked about everything, his work, her dreams of expanding the cafe, their families, their fears. He told her about the pressure of running a company worth billions, the guilt of having so much when Caroline had so little time. She told him about the loneliness of losing Dad, the fear that she'd never feel whole again. And they kissed. In the stacks between poetry and philosophy. On the roof under the stars. In his car outside her apartment. Each kiss felt like coming home and diving off a cliff simultaneously. By the third week of January, Laura had to admit what was happening. She was falling in love with Alexander Caldwell. Might have already fallen. Rachel noticed, of course. You're glowing. It's disgusting and wonderful. It's too fast, Laura said. We barely know each other. You know the important things. And I haven't seen you this happy since before Dad got sick. But on January 28th, everything shifted. Laura was closing up the bookstore when Alexander called. His voice sounded strange. Tight. Can I come over? I need to talk to you about something. Her stomach dropped. Of course. Is Sophie okay? She's fine. She's with a sitter. This is about us. 20 minutes later, he walked into the bookstore looking like he hadn't slept. Laura's hands went cold. What's wrong? She asked. Alexander sat at their usual table, running his hands through his hair. My board called an emergency meeting. There's a hostile takeover attempt. A venture capital firm that's been trying to acquire my company for 2 years just bought out 3 of my major investors. Okay, Laura said slowly. What does that mean? It means I have to go back to Silicon Valley. Tomorrow. For at least 6 weeks, maybe longer. I have to fight this, shore up support, convince the rest of the board to hold firm. Laura's heart was pounding. 6 weeks. I know we just started this, and the timing is terrible, but I can't lose the company. It's not about the money, it's about what we've built, the healthcare systems that depend on our software, the people who work for me. He looked at her with desperate eyes. But I don't want to lose this either. Lose you. You won't, Laura said automatically. It's 6 weeks. We can handle 6 weeks. There's more. Alexander's voice dropped. My ex-fiancée, Victoria, she's leading the takeover attempt. We were engaged before Caroline, called it off when I met her. She's been waiting for an opportunity like this. Laura felt something cold settle in her stomach. Your ex-fiancée is trying to take your company? She never forgave me for choosing Caroline. This is personal for her. He reached across the table, taking Laura's hands. But you need to know, there's going to be press. Photos of us together, probably. Strategy meetings that look like dates. Victoria's going to use every weapon she has, including making it seem like there's still something between us. Is there? Laura asked quietly. No. God, no. I haven't thought about Victoria in years. But she's calculating, and she knows exactly how to manipulate situations. He squeezed her hands. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Laura wanted to say yes immediately. But her mind was spinning. 6 weeks apart, right when they were building something real. An ex-fiancée who sounded like she knew how to play games Laura had never learned. I trust you, she said finally. But I'm scared. Me too. Alexander stood, pulling her into his arms. Come with me. Both of you. You and Sophie. I'll set you up in a house near mine, you can work on the bookstore remotely, and… Alexander, I can't. The bookstore can survive 6 weeks with someone else running it. Rachel could do it. That's not the point. Laura pulled back slightly. This is my life. My business. I can't just drop everything and follow you across the country. Something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, maybe. Understanding, definitely. You're right. I'm sorry. That was presumptuous. He took a breath. Then we'll make long-distance work. FaceTime every night. I'll fly back on weekends when I can. Okay, Laura said, but the word felt thin. They stood there holding each other, and Laura felt the first crack in the foundation they'd been building. Alexander left at dawn the next morning. He came to say goodbye, Sophie still sleepy in the car, and the hug felt desperate. 6 weeks, he said against her hair. I'll be back before you know it. Be safe. Fight hard. I love you, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out. I know it's fast, I know we haven't said it yet, but I do. I love you, Laura. Her heart broke and soared simultaneously. I love you too. One more kiss, and then he was gone. The first week wasn't terrible. They texted constantly, FaceTimed every night. Sophie drew pictures and held them up to the camera. Alexander looked exhausted but determined. The second week, the press started. Photos of Alexander and Victoria at business dinners. Articles speculating about a reunion. Victoria was beautiful, polished, exactly the kind of woman who belonged in Alexander's world of tech and billions. Laura tried not to look. Failed constantly. The third week, Alexander's calls got shorter. The time difference made scheduling harder. He missed 2 FaceTime dates because meetings ran late. Laura told herself it was fine. He was fighting for his company. This was temporary. But doubt crept in during the quiet moments. She'd watch couples in the bookstore, see families at the cafe, and wonder if she and Alexander were building something real or just a beautiful illusion that couldn't survive real life. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, Laura woke to flowers. 24 roses with a note, counting the days until I can hold you again. I love you. She smiled, took a photo, sent it to him with heart emojis. His response came 6 hours later, glad they arrived. Crazy day here. Talk tonight? That night, he called at 11 p.m. her time, 1 a.m. his. He looked destroyed. I'm sorry I'm late. Victoria's lawyers filed an injunction, we've been in emergency sessions all day. It's okay. Happy Valentine's Day. It's not the Valentine's Day I wanted to give you. He rubbed his face. I miss you so much it physically hurts. I miss you too. How much longer do you think? I don't know. Maybe 3 more weeks? Victoria's not backing down. She's making this as difficult as possible. They talked for 20 minutes before Alexander's assistant knocked on his door with urgent documents. I have to go, he said, looking miserable. I'm so sorry. It's fine. Go save your company. After he hung up, Laura sat in the dark and let herself cry. Because it wasn't fine. Because she could feel him slipping away, not because he wanted to, but because his world was bigger and more demanding than anything she'd imagined. And she didn't know if love was enough to bridge that distance. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Photos of Alexander and Victoria leaving a restaurant, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing. The caption read, Tech billionaire Alexander Caldwell rekindles romance with ex-fiancée amid company drama. Laura's hands shook as she looked at the photo. Alexander looked happy. Relaxed in a way he hadn't looked on their calls in days. She told herself there was an explanation. Told herself to trust him. But the doubt had teeth now, and it was hungry. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. The photo stared back at Laura from her phone screen at 2 in the morning. She'd been looking at it for an hour, studying every detail. The way Victoria's hand rested on Alexander's arm. The smile on his face. The easy comfort between them that spoke of history, of people who knew each other's rhythms. Laura set the phone down and pulled Dad's Langston Hughes collection into her lap. She opened to a dog-eared page, his handwriting in the margin. Love isn't about perfect moments. It's about choosing to believe even when belief is hard. She wanted to believe. Wanted to trust that what she and Alexander had built in those few perfect weeks was real enough to survive distance and doubt and beautiful ex-fiancés who belonged in his world in ways Laura never would. But wanting and doing were different countries. Her phone lit up. Alexander calling. She let it ring 3 times before answering. Hey, his voice was rough with exhaustion. I know it's late there. I just saw the article. Laura, it's not what it looks like. What does it look like? She kept her voice calm. We had a strategy dinner with lawyers. Victoria suggested this restaurant because it's where the board members eat. She wanted to be seen, wanted to send a message that we're unified. The photo makes it look like something it wasn't. You looked happy, Laura said quietly. Silence on the other end. Then, she said something funny. I don't even remember what. It was a reflex, laughing. Laura, you have to know there's nothing between us. I want to know that. I'm trying to know that. But you don't. His voice cracked slightly. You're doubting this. Doubting us. Laura closed her eyes. You're 3,000 miles away fighting a battle I don't understand with a woman who has history with you. Who knows your world, speaks your language, fits into your life in ways I can't. And I'm here running a bookstore in Asheville, looking at photos and wondering if I'm holding on to something that's already slipping away. You're not. Laura, I love you. I love you too. But maybe love isn't enough when our lives are this different. She heard him take a sharp breath. Don't do that. Don't give up on us because this is hard. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. You have another 3 weeks there, maybe more. What happens when you come back? Does the company crisis end? Do you stay in Asheville, or do you have to go back and forth? Where does Sophie go to school? How do we build a life when your life is in boardrooms and mine is in a bookstore? We figure it out. Together. How? Laura's voice broke. How do we figure it out, Alexander? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I'm waiting for you to realize that this was just a beautiful detour, but your real life is somewhere else. That's not true. Then tell me what happens next. Give me something concrete to hold on to. The silence stretched long enough that Laura thought the call had dropped. I don't know, Alexander finally said. I don't have all the answers right now. I'm fighting to save something I built from nothing, trying to be present for Sophie from across the country, and missing you so much I can barely think straight. But I know I want you in my life. I know that what we have is real. I need more than want, Alexander. I need a plan. I need to know this isn't just beautiful and temporary. I can't give you a perfect plan right now. I'm asking you to trust me, to wait for me, to believe that when I get through this, we'll figure out the rest. Laura looked at the photo again. I'm tired of waiting. Tired of wondering. Tired of feeling like I'm competing with a life I'll never fit into. You're not competing with anything. Laura, please. I think we both need some space to think, she said softly. You need to focus on saving your company without worrying about me. And I need to figure out if I can actually do this, if I'm strong enough for a relationship that asks this much. Don't do this. His voice was raw now. Don't walk away. I'm not walking away. I'm giving us both room to breathe and think clearly. Tears were streaming down her face now. I love you. That's not in question. But I don't know if love is enough. It has to be enough. Maybe. I just don't know right now. She wiped her eyes. Go fight for your company, Alexander. Be there for Sophie. And when this is over, when you have clarity about what your life actually looks like, we can talk about whether there's room in it for me. There's always room for you. Laura. Goodbye, Alexander. I hope you win. She hung up before he could respond, then turned off her phone before she could change her mind. The bookstore felt impossibly empty the next morning. Laura went through the motions, helped customers, restocked shelves, made coffee. Rachel showed up at lunch and took one look at her face. What happened? Laura told her everything. The photo, the call, the space she'd asked for. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Do you think you made the right choice? I don't know. I just know I couldn't keep pretending the distance wasn't killing me. Fair enough. But Laura, you're scared. I get it. After what happened with David, after losing Dad, you're terrified of loving someone and losing them. But pushing Alexander away because you're afraid, that's not protecting yourself. That's just choosing the loss on your own terms. Maybe that's easier than waiting for it to happen anyway. Rachel grabbed her hands. Or maybe he's worth the risk. Maybe what you two have is worth fighting for, even when it's hard. Laura wanted to believe that. But the fear had settled deep in her bones. Her phone stayed off for 3 days. She knew Alexander was probably calling, texting, trying to reach her. But she needed the silence to think, to feel, to figure out what she actually wanted. On the 4th day, Rachel insisted she turn it back on. 47 missed calls. 23 voicemails. Dozens of texts. Laura's hands shook as she scrolled through them. The first few were pleading. Please talk to me. Please don't do this. Then came longer messages about the takeover battle, updates she knew he was sharing to keep her connected to his life. Then one that made her breath catch. Victoria made her final move today. Offered to drop the takeover if I'd consider merging our companies. Consider a partnership. She suggested we could make it work, personally and professionally. I told her no. Told her there's someone else, someone who matters more than any company. She laughed and said if that were true, you'd be here. I couldn't argue with her. But she's wrong. You matter more than she'll ever understand. Laura sat down hard, reading it again. The next message was from 2 days ago. The board voted. I won. Kept the company independent. But it doesn't feel like winning without you to tell. Sophie keeps asking when we're going back to Asheville, when she can see Laura again. I don't know what to tell her. The most recent was from this morning. I'm coming back to Asheville on March 20th. Not to pressure you, not to force a conversation you're not ready for. But I need to see you. Need to say some things in person. If you don't want to see me, I'll respect that. But I'm hoping you will. I love you, Laura. That hasn't changed. March 20th was today. Laura looked at the clock. 3:47 p.m. She called Rachel, hands shaking. I need you to watch the store. Now. What's happening? Alexander's coming back. Today. And I need to figure out what I'm going to say to him. Laura went home, showered, changed 3 times, then sat on her couch staring at nothing. What did she want to say? That she was sorry? That she loved him? That she was terrified? All of it. None of it. Her doorbell rang at 6:30. Laura opened it to find Alexander standing there, looking thinner than she remembered, exhaustion written in every line of his body. But his eyes lit up when he saw her. Hi, he said softly. Where's Sophie? With a sitter. I needed to talk to you alone first. He hesitated. Can I come in? Laura stepped back, letting him enter. They stood in her living room, the space between them feeling like an ocean. You won, Laura said. Against Victoria. I did. Kept the company independent, bought out the investors who sided with her, restructured the board. He paused. It's done. Completely done. That's good. You must be relieved. I am. But Laura, I didn't come here to talk about the company. He took a step closer. I came to tell you that the last 6 weeks have been hell. Not because of Victoria or the takeover or the stress. Because I couldn't talk to you. Couldn't see you. Couldn't hold you. Laura's eyes filled. Alexander. Let me finish. Please. He took a breath. You were right. About everything. I asked you to wait without giving you a reason to believe it would be worth it. I asked you to trust me while I was 3,000 miles away dealing with my ex and not giving you any clarity about our future. That wasn't fair. You were fighting for your company. I understood that. But you needed to know you were fighting for two, and I didn't make that clear enough. He moved closer, close enough to touch, but he kept his hands at his sides. So I'm here to make it clear now. I'm selling the company, Laura. Her heart stopped. What? I'm selling it. Not to Victoria, to a company in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. They're keeping all my employees, maintaining the mission, and offering me a board position that requires maybe 10 hours a week of my time. His eyes never left hers. I'm moving to Asheville permanently. Buying a house here, enrolling Sophie in school here, building a life here. You can't sell your company for me. Alexander, I'm not selling it for you. I'm selling it for me. For Sophie. For the life I want instead of the life I thought I was supposed to have. He finally reached for her hands. The last 6 weeks taught me something. Being away from you, from this place, from the simplicity and beauty of what we were building, it showed me that I've been chasing the wrong things. Success isn't a company worth billions. It's Sophie laughing while looking at stars. It's having dinner with someone who sees me, not my money. It's waking up in a place I chose because I love it, not because it's convenient for work. Tears were streaming down Laura's face. You love Asheville? I love you. Asheville is where you are, so yes, I love it too. He smiled slightly. But also, it's beautiful and calm and everything I didn't know I needed. Sophie's happier here than she's been since Caroline died. I'm happier here. This is where we belong. What about your work? Your career? I'm keeping a consulting firm. Small, manageable, something I can run from anywhere. And I want to invest in local businesses, help Asheville entrepreneurs build their dreams. Starting with a certain bookstore owner who mentioned wanting to expand her cafe. Laura laughed through her tears. You want to invest in my bookstore? I want to invest in our future. Whatever that looks like. If you'll have me. If you can forgive me for not being clear enough about what you mean to me. There's nothing to forgive. I was scared. I'm still scared. Me too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Laura Pierce. I want to build a life here, with you, if you'll let me. No distance, no ex-fiancés, no competing priorities. Just us, and Sophie, and this beautiful city, and whatever future we want to create. I love you too, Laura whispered. I never stopped, even when I was afraid. Then be afraid with me. We'll figure it out together. He kissed her then, and it felt like every star in the sky aligning at once. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. 3 months later, May 2025. The morning sun filtered through the bookstore windows, catching dust motes in golden beams that made everything look softer, dreamlike. Laura stood behind the counter, watching Alexander help Sophie reach a book on the upper shelf, and felt that now familiar warmth spread through her chest. This was her life now. Every morning, this. Alexander had closed the sale of his company in early April. The news had made headlines for about a week. Tech billionaire walks away from Silicon Valley, but by then, Alexander had already stopped reading articles about himself. He'd bought a beautiful craftsman house 2 blocks from the bookstore, spent a month renovating it with Sophie's input on every color choice and design decision. Sophie had started at a small private school in Asheville and had made 3 best friends within the first week. She came to the bookstore every day after school, did her homework at Laura's cafe table, helped shelve books in the children's section, and had started calling Laura's apartment her second home. Laura had expanded the cafe, thanks to Alexander's investment and business guidance. They'd knocked down a wall, added 6 more tables, hired 2 part-time baristas. The bookstore had become a community hub, morning coffee for locals, afternoon story time for kids, evening book clubs for everyone in between. And through it all, Alexander had been there. Present in ways that still surprised her. He'd learned to make her favorite coffee. Memorized her bookstore organization system. Showed up with lunch on busy days. Took Sophie to the park when Laura needed quiet time to work on inventory. They'd moved slowly with the relationship, both of them cautious after the rocky start. But slowly had been perfect. Dinners together 3 nights a week. Family hikes on Sundays. Quiet evenings reading side by side. Sophie falling asleep between them during movie nights. And the moments alone, when Sophie was at sleepovers or with Rachel. Those moments when Alexander would pull Laura close and whisper all the ways he loved her, show her with his hands and mouth and complete attention that she was exactly where he wanted to be. Now, watching him lift Sophie so she could grab her book, Laura thought about how far they'd come since that lonely New Year's Eve. Got it. Sophie squealed, clutching a book about marine biology. Can we go to the aquarium this weekend? We'll see, Alexander said, setting her down. Laura might have plans. Actually, the aquarium sounds perfect, Laura said, walking over to them. I haven't been in years. Sophie hugged her waist. You're the best. Can we get ice cream after? Definitely. Sophie ran off to her favorite reading corner, and Alexander pulled Laura close, kissing her forehead. You're good with her, he said quietly. You know that, right? She makes it easy. She's an amazing kid. She loves you. She told me last night that she wishes you lived with us. Laura's heart stuttered. They'd been dancing around that conversation for weeks. Alexander had hinted, Sophie had asked directly more than once, but Laura had held back. Not because she didn't want it, but because she wanted to be sure. Wanted Sophie to be sure. What did you tell her? Laura asked. That it's something the grown-ups need to talk about when we're ready. His arms tightened around her. Are we ready? Before Laura could answer, the bell above the door chimed. Rachel walked in carrying a box, grinning like she had a secret. Special delivery, she announced. Just arrived for you, Laura. Laura frowned, taking the box. It was light, wrapped in simple brown paper with her name written in elegant script. She opened it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the kind Dad used to carry. And tucked into the first page, a note in Alexander's handwriting. She looked up at him, confused. When did you? Just read it, he said softly. Laura opened the journal. The first page held a letter. Laura. Your father believed books were how we learned to be human. You told me that the first night we met, and I've thought about it every day since. Because you've taught me how to be human again. How to be present. How to love without fear. How to build a life that matters instead of one that just looks impressive from the outside. This journal was your father's. Rachel helped me find it in the boxes of his things you've been storing. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to give you something that connected the past you loved with the future I hope we're building. I've written something on the next page. Read it when you're ready. I love you. Alexander. Laura's hands trembled as she turned the page. There, in Dad's familiar handwriting, was an entry from years ago. She recognized the date, 2 weeks before he died. February 10, 2023. Laura came by today with soup and books and that stubborn insistence that I'm going to beat this thing. We both know I'm not, but I love her for pretending. She told me about the bookstore idea. About using the money to build something in my honor. I told her to build it for herself, not for me. To build a life that makes her happy, not one that just holds on to the past. I told her something else too. Told her that one day, someone's going to walk into her life and see her the way I see her, brilliant, kind, stronger than she knows. And when that person comes, I hope she's brave enough to let them in. Hope she doesn't let fear keep her from the love she deserves. I won't be there to meet whoever that person is. But I'll be watching from wherever I end up, hoping she chooses joy over safety, hope over fear, love over loneliness. My girl deserves everything. I hope she believes that. Laura couldn't see through her tears. Alexander wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Keep reading, he whispered. She turned to the next page. Alexander's handwriting now. May 15, 2025. Sir, I never got to meet you, but I wish I had. Your daughter is everything you said she was, brilliant, kind, stronger than she knows. She saved me and Sophie when we didn't even know we needed saving. She taught us that Asheville could be home, that books and stars and quiet mornings matter more than empires, that love is built in ordinary moments. I'm writing to ask your blessing for something, even though I can't hear your answer. I hope the fact that you left this journal, that you wrote those words about wanting Laura to find love, means you'd approve. I'm going to ask her to marry me. To build a life with Sophie and me. To let us be her family the way she's become ours. I promise to love her with everything I have. To show up every day. To honor what you built in her, this capacity for hope and kindness and creating beauty from loss. I promise to give her the life you wanted for her, the joy and partnership and home she deserves. I hope that's enough. Alexander. Laura turned around in his arms, tears streaming down her face. Alexander. He was already kneeling, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Sophie appeared at his side, bouncing with barely contained excitement. Rachel stood by the door, crying herself. "Laura Pierce," Alexander said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I came to Asheville broken and lost, and you put me back together just by being yourself. You showed Sophie what love looks like in action. You showed me that the best life isn't the biggest one, it's the truest one. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy, supporting your dreams, and watching stars with you on the roof. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, set in rose gold. Simple and stunning. "Yes," Laura whispered, then louder, "Yes. Absolutely yes." Alexander slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that made Sophie giggle and Rachel cheer. When they broke apart, Sophie crashed into both of them, hugging them tight. "Does this mean you're going to be my mom?" Sophie asked, looking up at Laura with hopeful eyes. Laura knelt down to Sophie's level. "I would be honored to be your mom, if that's what you want. It's what I want most in the whole world." "Well, that and a puppy." Alexander laughed. "We'll negotiate the puppy." The rest of the day blurred in the best possible way. Rachel closed the bookstore early and they celebrated with champagne and sparkling cider, calling friends, making plans. Alexander had already talked to the event coordinator at the Biltmore estate about a small wedding in the gardens. Laura had laughed, kissed him, said anywhere was perfect as long as he was there. That evening, the three of them went to their overlook, the mountain spot where Laura had first brought them. They watched the sunset paint the Blue Ridge Mountains in shades of gold and rose, Sophie between them, all of them quiet with contentment. "When should we get married?" Alexander asked, his arm around Laura's shoulders. "Soon," Laura said. "I don't want to wait." "June? Perfect." Sophie looked up at them. "Can I be the flower girl?" "You can be whatever you want," Laura said, kissing the top of her head. They stayed until the stars came out, pointing out constellations, making wishes, talking about the future. Sophie fell asleep against Laura's shoulder, and Alexander carried her to the car, the three of them driving home through the soft Asheville night. Home. The word felt right now. Complete. 2 months later, on a perfect June afternoon, Laura walked down a garden path at the Biltmore estate, holding Rachel's arm, wearing a simple lace dress that moved like water. Sophie walked ahead of them, scattering rose petals and grinning at everyone. Alexander waited at the end of the path under an arch of white flowers, looking at Laura like she was the only person in the world. His eyes were bright with tears he didn't bother hiding. The ceremony was small: Rachel, a few close friends, Sophie's new school friends and their parents, some of Laura's regular customers who'd become family. The officiant spoke about love that comes when you're not looking, about building families from choice and courage. When it was time for vows, Alexander took Laura's hands. "Laura, you taught me that the best things in life are the quiet ones. Morning coffee, shared books, watching our daughter discover the world. I promise to show up for all of it, every single day. I promise to support your dreams as fiercely as you've supported mine. I promise to love you in the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones, for as long as we both live." Laura's voice shook but held strong. "Alexander, you and Sophie walked into my bookstore when I'd forgotten how to hope. You reminded me that love doesn't replace what we've lost, it adds to what we've been given. I promise to build a life with you that honors where we've been and celebrates where we're going. I promise to love Sophie as my own, to love you with everything I have, and to never stop believing in us." When the officiant pronounced them married, Alexander kissed her like he was coming home. Sophie cheered louder than anyone. At the reception, they danced to an old jazz song Dad used to play. Sophie cut in halfway through, and they danced as a family, all three of them laughing. Later, when the sun set and the string lights came on, Alexander pulled Laura aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "Happy?" he asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Happier than I knew was possible." "Me too." He kissed her softly. "Thank you for taking a chance on a broken billionaire and his daughter. Thank you for walking into my bookstore on New Year's Eve." They stood together watching their guests, watching Sophie dance with Rachel, watching the life they'd built unfold in front of them. Laura thought about Dad's journal entry, about his hope that she'd choose joy over safety. She'd chosen both, it turned out. Found safety in Alexander's arms and joy in the family they were creating. Above them, the stars were beginning to emerge. Laura found the bright one Alexander had shown Sophie that first night, the one they decided was Caroline. And next to it, another bright star that had to be Dad. Watching over them. Approving. The future stretched out ahead of them, full of ordinary mornings and extraordinary love, bookstore days and mountain sunsets, a daughter who needed them both and the family they'd chosen to become. And Laura knew, with the certainty that comes from having survived loss and found love again, that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Home. Family. Forever. The stars seemed to shine brighter, and in the distance, thunder rumbled over the Blue Ridge Mountains, promising rain and growth and all the beautiful complications of a life lived fully. Alexander took her hand. "Ready to start our forever?" Laura smiled, squeezed his hand, and said the easiest word she'd ever spoken. "Yes." Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next.